I'm Devyn, a life coach.
I'm Meg, a death doula. And this podcast is what happens when a life coach and a death doula walk into a bar.
Honest conversations about grief, joy, and who gets your mother's pearl earrings. Nothing is off limits.
And it all goes back to death.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of It All Goes Back to Death. It's our very first episode. Are you so excited to be here?
Yes, I'm excited and ready.
Me too. I am Devyn. I'm a life coach.
And I'm Meg, and I'm a death doula.
And this podcast is what happens when a life coach and a death doula walk into a bar. We're talking about everything from grief and joy and purpose, love, relationships. Nothing is off limits, would you say?
I agree. And it all goes back to death, all of these topics.
It all goes back to death. Yeah, it's true. We decided on the name because in all of our conversations, there's just this string that it all goes back to death. Every single thing that we talk about, regardless of how uplifting and amazing it is, or how upsetting and sad something is, it all goes back to death.
And it can be a book we read, a movie we saw, a conversation we had in the Uber, or at a restaurant, or a show we saw on reality TV. Whatever it is, whatever we talk about, we can find the thread, and it all goes back to death.
It's true. Which brings me to our first order of business, which is that every week we're going to start with basically just chatting like we normally do. We started having these conversations 10 months ago in hopes of writing a book about all of the things we're going to talk about. And our conversations were so good that we said we have to give this a place to live in the world and to have these kinds of conversations with other people. But at the beginning of every episode, we're going to really just talk like we talk on the phone.
Yeah, we're going to talk about our week since the last time we talked.
Talking about our weeks. Yeah. So how was your week?
My week was insane, not in a bad way, just in a busy way. Mm-hmm. And my other life, well, I have a couple of other lives. One other life is that I'm a mom, but another life, I do interior design. So right now I'm in the middle of doing construction in my house, and I'm living in the house. So for those of you who have done it, it's really difficult. And it reminds me of two other times in my life. And one time was when I would have a 6-week-old baby and I was exhausted and sleep deprived. And the other time was when I did hospice in my house with my dad. These are the 3 times I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, I'm exhausted. So, it's a very common feeling in different parts of your life.
Yeah. No, I know. You texted me earlier this week and said, I looked in the mirror and I literally feel like I just did hospice. Yeah. And I said, it all goes back to death. But also, I think it's so interesting because part of what that conversation ended up being, just us via text, was even if you haven't experienced the loss of someone, like you've experienced the feelings of grief in a lot of ways. And it's, it is that, like you were talking about, sleepless nights and having to organize things and getting everything just like situated and set up the way it needs to be. Yeah, the anxiety, all of these things. And we can talk about kind of why we're doing this and who we're doing this for in a little bit. But I think part of what we want from these conversations is that it's not just for the person who is in the throes of grief, right? There are so many circumstances that end up having to do with grief, relationships.
Similar feelings. Yeah.
Similar feelings. So, okay. So you had a long week and you're having a long week.
I'm having a long week. And, I did go out to dinner last night with some friends. 2 were 87 and 1 is 91. Oh my God. There really is nothing greater than going out with people who are closer to death, if it goes in the natural order, and how refreshing it is because they know it and they talk about it and they joke about it and they're ready for it. It's really amazing. And so going out to dinner with them was the highlight of my day.
Wait, what were some of the things they were saying? Because I'm really dying to know.
Oh, they were so cute. The one lady, it was another lady and 2 gentlemen. So we were like 2 couples. And I sat with her and, she was talking about her friends. And she said, I don't want to be the last man standing. And I said, wow, I get that. I don't either. But if you looked at her, you would think she was 55 years old. I mean, she was stunning, all natural, great. And she was funny because she had 2 glasses of wine, and I'm not telling on her, but she's just like, this probably killed all the bad stuff. And this is what kept me alive for so long. And this is what kept me going. And she was just so lighthearted about being her age. And she was so proud of the way she looked and happy with her health and enjoying every day and thankful for the time that she had here. It was great.
No, I love stories like that, because I think that this is, a lot more of sort of what I do just in life coaching in general, is help people live lives on a regular basis that feel really good and that feel intentional and that feel like, okay, yeah, enjoy the 2 glasses of wine and go out and laugh your ass off for, however long with all of your friends. And it kind of comes back to, and another thing we'll talk about very frequently is this idea of having a good relationship with death, and knowing that because you're having a good relationship with life, that's just part of life. And like you said, sort of the natural order. And I think we can learn a lot from people who have that lightheartedness about them, not because it's not scary, but just because...
And they don't have as much fear because they've had so much time. I think the younger you are, the more fearful you are, obviously, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. But if they could teach younger people to live more intentionally earlier, how great would that be?
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have conversations that's
our goal.
Ideas. Yeah. Because I do think, I know a lot of people in my life. So I'm 32 for context. And I know a lot of people in my life who are just kind of starting these journeys into marriage, motherhood, like real sort of peak career, or at least kind of climbing that ladder. And a lot of people I know are afraid of dying and having anxiety around that. And I find, actually it's interesting, because if I'm really thinking about it and trying to pinpoint like an age where I think this starts, I feel like 45 is when people, for whatever reason, start to kind of turn this corner of maybe health anxiety. Like I know a lot of people who, once they turned 45 and got kind of into their mid to late 40s, started to have a lot of health anxiety and feeling like something was wrong with them. And, I think that obviously for women, you go through menopause or perimenopause. And so there's a lot of physical change that comes with that, anxiety included. And, people have
that stereotypical middle age, right? That's the middle age crisis, or whatever they call it.
Yeah. And like empty nesting. I mean, I know you can speak to this, obviously, more than I can. Yeah.
Ouch. That was a big one.
Whole different kind of grief.
Exactly. That is a grief. Even, this is going to sound, again, materialistic and shallow, but when you live in a house and you raise your family for 25 years and you sell that house, people don't give grief enough credit. You have to grieve that house. And I don't mean the material thing, but you have to grieve the time in your life in that house. That's over. And that's a real thing. And I think people don't realize it till it hits them. And they go, what is this? Why am I so sad about a house? It's not the house. It's the part of your life that you always looked forward to. And now it's over.
Yeah. Yeah, that just gave me chills.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
I don't even want to have kids or get married, but that's No, I do think that there's,
hard one.
Yeah, it's a really hard one. And I know a lot of people, whether they're clients or just family members or friends, who I've seen go through these phases, and some handle it better than others, right? Some people put their energy towards things that, feel good for them, and that they find hobbies and they find things to do, or they're still working. And other people really feel like, oh, my life is over, and grieve that part of their life and don't open up a new chapter. Really maybe until their kids start having kids. I think that that's kind of the next thing. But there's definitely grief in just endings and moving on and closing chapters and opening other ones.
That's our whole life. And so I think why we don't, as a culture, deal well with grief is because we don't talk about it. And it being death, but death can be an ending. And the key, I think, is just talking about it earlier. And I think I texted you earlier, and for one of our threads, I was like, if we can teach kids sex education in 5th grade, why can't we teach them about death at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And why can't we get this conversation going earlier? So you're not so afraid of the Grim Reaper when you hear death doula. Like, literally, I can't use that term. I have to be careful where I use that term, because people look at me like, oh, you're coming after me? And it's not about the moment of death. It's about preparing for it your whole life.
Yeah. This actually is a good moment to first of all ask you kind of like what exactly a death doula does for people who are listening and don't know. And then also what, got you into wanting to be a death doula and how you went through that process.
So a death doula is basically non-medical support for people and families that are, diagnosed in end of life. And so I took a course on that and wanted to help people basically in hospice situations, support them above and beyond hospice. So to be another arm for hospice, be a communicator between the families and hospice, support the families, support the dying person, support them in any way, and even support them before the event in terms of getting your affairs in order or helping with the house or helping, in many different ways. It's non-medical support in many different ways. But what's happened is I've developed a passion not only to do that and to teach others how to do that, because we have to help each other. Mm-hmm. We've never had more people 65 and over ever, and they call it the silver tsunami. Mm-hmm. And our healthcare system isn't able to provide for that. So we have to help each other. So I want to teach people to help each other. And I really want to change the culture around death. So I started as a non-medical support for people in hospice, and now I'm transitioning kind of with you. The work I want to do is to help bring a positive language to the culture.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to have a father that talked to me about death very early on. And he made me feel, because he was 42 when I was born. So I think he was always concerned that he was going to leave me young. But he left me too young, but he was 88. And so he used to say, I'm going to be gone one day and you're going to be okay. And we would talk about it. So I talked about it my whole life. Then I had to go through it a lot. Mm-hmm. So I talked about it with my kids, their whole lives, even naming them after loved ones that have passed. So right out of the gate, once they could say their name, they knew the story of where it came from and how it came to be. Yeah. So if you ask my kids, they probably have great relationships with death, but we probably talked about death an incessant amount. And
definitely more than the average family.
Yeah, definitely more than the average. So much so that I have a quick funny story. So my uncle had called me at one point to see if he could do his hospice at my house. Mm-hmm. I'll give the backstory another time, but I said, of course. So he came. Now, I had already done hospice in my house. So he comes in. We know how to do this. It goes very well, thank God. Mm-hmm. And but at the end, after the person dies and you call the funeral home, they come and they get the body and they say this could be a traumatic time, so if you want to leave the room, we'll remove the body, or you could come with us. So thank God it came during the day, because all I could think about was the neighbors are going to be like, oh my God, what is that hospice house she's running across the street? So that was a relief. So I go out into the hallway to tell my son what's about to happen, and his back is to me and he's playing a video game and he says, I know, Mom, they're coming to get the body. I won't turn around. I think to myself, oh my God, what have I done? I was thinking, what have I done?
But I think that, it all worked out. This is the thing, is that as children, and to your point, we think that kids can't handle certain conversations. Right. And if you kind of make it, obviously that's not necessarily a lighthearted moment, but the conversation around it was, because there's a kid involved. And so I think that, and you and I talk about this a lot, having humor, having lighthearted conversations around some more serious things oftentimes is a way to help people acclimate to having a harder conversation, you know, and help people get to a place where it's like, okay, that is a funny story. And if I try something like that, or if I, you know, have a conversation with my kid, that might be the result is a funny story, you know, and not something that's traumatic. And yes, you can say, what did I do? Or what have I done? But the reality is like your kids are really well-adjusted humans in the world. And it's part of life.
They don't live their life in fear of dying. They live their life because they know they are going to die, and they live their lives, you know, letting the people they know that they love and taking chances and, you know, all that stuff. But it came from early dialogue, early positive dialogue. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to get this culture talking about it more and earlier. Yeah. And less scary.
Totally. And it's funny because I'm thinking just about my upbringing, and we can get into this because the reason you and I even know each other is because of my mom, who was
the love of my life at 18.
Yes, is the love of your life.
42 years ago, we met at freshman orientation. And actually, she's the one that, I think it was in college, started calling me the angel of death. So I kind of always knew I was somehow
destined.
Talking a lot about death at an early stage. But and so she and Bobby, her husband, and me and Kieran, my husband, all went to college together. And we all fell in love together. And we each had 4 kids. And then we continued to just engage our families and grow together as much as possible in a very busy, you know, difficult world that pulls everybody in different ways. But we're a very tight-knit group. So I am your auntie.
Yes, you are my auntie.
Especially from Rhode Island, because everybody's auntie in Rhode Island.
Such a funny story about that. Also, that I was on a train platform. This is an aside, and this will happen a lot in the podcast. We have to just think of these things on the spot and talk about them. But I was on the train platform the other day, and I met this woman. I was in Rhode Island coming to New York, and she said, she's probably 77 years old, and she said, have you been watching The Real Housewives of Rhode Island? And I said, of course. I mean, it's like a cultural phenomenon at this point. And my friends can't stop asking me questions about, they're like, what is Cranston? I'm like, I don't know how to explain this to you. Right. But she was saying, she said, do you know the aunties? One of the women on the show has these gaggle of aunts. And she said to me, she said 2 things. She said, one of the aunties was my sister's biggest bully, and the other one was a slut. She asked for black satin sheets for her hope chest. And I was done.
Oh my God, no way.
No way. And P.S., I'm texting my mom being like, oh my God, you'll never guess. I ran into this woman. She's like, how did you even talk to this woman? I said, this is my life. This is literally, people come up to me. They start talking to me. We probably had this conversation in 7 minutes. It was not 30 minutes. Yeah, totally. But it was so funny. And just when you said that, I was like, oh my God, the aunties. Yeah, there's a bully and a slut.
So tune into Real Housewives in Rhode Island.
Tune in. But so growing up in my house, I think that it's interesting because we never didn't talk about death, right? It wasn't something that was off limits. And I come from a very big family. And so people died when I was younger. My grandparents died, my great-grandparents died. There have been a lot of family deaths. And I think in the last couple of years, very concentrated amount of family deaths, which is why I feel probably now is the time to have these conversations because it's so prevalent in my life. But, I was diagnosed with life-threatening severe food allergies at 11 months old. And it felt...
I remember.
Yes.
I remember.
I know. My mom's like, the one time I had anxiety in my life was after this happened. But I think that, for me, it was different than your kids and knowing that, you know, you live your life and you're eventually going to die. My thing was like, I could eat a cookie and die tomorrow. Right. So my relationship, and I remember being probably like 13, 14 years old and really having a moment where I used to have like, if someone were eating something that I was allergic to next to me, it would get me feeling like, oh my God, am I having an allergic reaction? Just the anxiety of that inducing. Yeah. And I remember like a very, very specific moment in my life being in a high school bathroom. I was probably like a freshman, 14 years old. And I was taking a Benadryl in a bathroom stall because I was freaking out that I was having a reaction, but I wasn't. And I literally remember sitting down and having sort of the pact with myself, like, you're either going to live this way or this way. This way being you're going to have anxiety and be fearful and think you're always dying or something bad is always happening or around the corner, or you're going to just live and you're going to do your part and let the rest of everything, people, universe, whatever, meet you halfway. And I was just like, I can't live like this for the rest of my life. It's unsustainable to have this kind of anxiety or to feel like everything I do, if I touch a door handle, rub my eye, I'm going to die. Like it was such a, you know, thought process of mine. Yeah. And so I think that, it was consuming, but it also in that moment truly, and it really was a moment that it shifted. And I think this happens throughout life often enough, where you just kind of have this like epiphany that like there's a download or there's something that comes to you. Yeah. And I just made a choice, and I'm not kidding. Since then, I mean, that was 17, 18 years ago. I really have lived my life like, I'm enjoying this. This is where I am today. I'm not worried about death. I'm not worried about dying. Of course, I'm careful and I'm not reckless and all of these things. But you know, I think that was kind of my first intro to death and dying, was not necessarily it happening to somebody else. Witnessing it, but really having those kind of all-consuming feelings that death is imminent, and you know, you have this finite amount of time. And that was also like the 90s. It was not the world we live in today, where everyone is gluten-free and dairy-free and there are a million different milk choices.
That was hard.
Restaurants turning away. Yeah.
Still peanuts on the airplane. Remember?
Yeah, peanuts on the airplane. Yeah.
I just had a memory. Remember when we met you at Caserta's and we had come from our house in East Greenwich and I had cashews and I kissed you on the cheek in Caserta's and your face blew up?
That happens like once a week. So not that I don't remember that exact incident, but that happened a lot. Like it still happens sometimes. Yeah. No, I know.
Like, I'm the one that's going to kill her. Like, I know. Oh my God. That was awful. But anyways, I just had a flashback.
No, I know. And there are a lot of like flashbacks like that where I feel like, you know, if I look back on just my life in general, that I really did have a lot of kind of like near death experiences. And I did have actual reactions too. But I think that's part of the reason why I'm so comfortable talking about it, because I've felt this close to it. Yeah. And
lived it.
It's made me, I think, as an adult, like feel very empowered in helping other people through having those feelings, because, you know, or just being able to live in a way that feels like I'm not going to regret this. And you and I spoke about this earlier, but so much of my purpose in what I do is getting people to a place where in their present day life, they're not going to be 80 years old and saying, oh my God, when I look back on my life, I didn't do any of the things I wanted to do. I didn't get to do this. I didn't get to do that. I was afraid to do this. I was afraid to have this relationship or go for this, you know, job interview. That freaks me out. And I assume it freaks other people out. And so my whole kind of mantra, especially with the women that I work with, is that your life is meant to be enjoyable for the most part. There's inevitable suffering. There's inevitable hardship. You
adversity.
Kind of contributing to it, or you're solutioning it. And I think that in so many cases, people want to live a happy, nice life. And it's possible for a lot of people to do that, but it does require an intentionality in saying, I'm not going to live every single day in fear. I'm not going to live every day, you know, in this kind of confined bubble. and you and I maybe have this in common. Like, I'm okay with being outside of my comfort zone, and I think that you are, look at you now.
It's when you grow. I mean, look at me. In my head, I'm 28, but I will be 60. And starting a podcast at 60, I mean, come on, that's nuts, But
yeah, but why did you do it?
Now, when?
Yes.
Yeah, so, another thing is, I feel like I do everything for my kids, but again, it's for the kids. I want to show them that if I can do this, there's nothing they can't do. I did a triathlon when I turned 40. Same thing. I'm not athletic. I just did it because I wanted to show them, if I can do this, there's nothing you can't do. So just keep swinging, while you're alive. Just keep swinging. So I'm putting it all out there, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully it gives my kids the guts to swing for things.
Yeah. No, I think it will give your kids the guts to swing for things. But I also think, and I was saying this to you when we had this conversation and you said, I did a triathlon when I was 40, that there are so many people, and I know this, I run an anonymous interview series called Told Her 20 Questions, and I have interviewed thousands of women from around the world, all different ages. There are so many women who are 60 years old who feel like it's too late. They can't do what they want to do. It's over.
You gotta change that. Yeah.
Totally. And by the way, there is also another group of 60-year-old women who are like totally balls to the wall, badass, doing whatever they want, like lifting heavy weights.
It's my time.
Yeah. So there are both, kind of groups exist, but I think that it will be inspiring for people to hear from someone who is taking a chance on themselves and also something totally brand new to you. I mean, when we started this process, and again, it was really you coming to me probably 2 years ago saying, I'm a death doula now, and I have a book to write, and I want you to write it with me, because I had written a book called Everyday Affirmations and was familiar with that whole process. And so I said, okay. And it wasn't really probably until, a year and a half, almost 2 years later, that you really said, okay, let's get serious. And we started to have these conversations. And when I first mentioned, because our conversations were so good that I was like, these just have to live somewhere, and we have to just be talking to people, because I think that they'll relate to so much of what we're saying.
I think what the listeners can expect from us is probably just a lot of, or maybe too much information about our daily lives. And
that are usually very interesting, to be honest. I feel like I always get off the phone with you and I'm like, I've learned something new, something happened. I got a good little anecdote or story.
So wouldn't that be like the greatest thing, is to have our listeners feel that way? That would be awesome.
Yeah.
We definitely want to do interviews with authors and other experts in the field. I just think, there's so much to learn across the board. So we'll be bringing people in, experts, and we'll be doing Q&As. And
we love threads. So if anybody ever wants to get in touch with us or ask a question that is featured on the pod, find us on threads. It all goes back to death. But I also, to your point about doing interviews, like I think that, and we talked about this a little bit this morning, wanting to do interviews with just people who have also been through these experiences, not necessarily just experts, right? And someone who, might not be front facing or public facing, but who has had an experience that speaks to a larger subset, group of people who can probably relate. I mean, I think that that's probably the biggest takeaway from this, right? Is that we want to make these conversations that can sometimes be uncomfortable or scary or whatever else, digestible and approachable, and make people feel like there can be humor involved, as we said, that there can be funny stories, that we can remember people in a way that feels, energetically like they're still here and around us. And that's how we help people's memories live on. But also that we just want to have real conversations that hopefully help people and resonate and make people feel a little less alone. I think that that's probably my biggest mission in the world.
I feel like back to feeling, alone or in your head, the best way to get out of your head is to help others.
Yeah.
And you stop thinking about yourself and you think about others. And there are so many people that need help with this.
Yeah.
And I mean, just, you talk to nurses and they have such a good relationship with death. Why? Because they've seen it so much, right? So if we can teach the layperson to just roll their sleeves up and jump in and help, pretty much the most personal experience there is to humanity is transitioning to another life. I mean, birth and death, right? It's the same thing. You go through this birth canal to another life. If we can make people less afraid and more empathetic and jump in and help others, I mean, not only are you helping yourself, but you're helping everybody else. So it's a win-win. So we're going to help people do that.
Yeah. And also find ways, I think that there is an ecosystem per se in every sort of genre of life where there are people who are the doers, and then there are people who are the constants. We talk about that a lot. The supporters, the people who send the text messages, the people who are there for people without, having to ask or anything like that, the people who show up. So there are many different ways to help. And I think that that's part of also what we're going to be talking about is that it's not just, oh, I have to go become a death doula and help people, right?
And help someone die.
That's not for everyone.
No, it's
not for everyone. And we have to, understand people's capacity, because I think that's a real thing. But I think that there are so many different ways to help in times of transitioning from life to death. And also, even if that means being the person who initiates the conversation with your aging parents about what they want to have happen when they pass. Like, there are people who are necessary in the ecosystem in all ways. And I think that that's part of what we want to talk about too, is not just there's one way of helping, there's one way of doing this. And same with just how to have an end of life experience. I mean, even before I started talking to you, I'm not a religious person per se, so I don't have these ideas of exactly how I want things to go. I just know what I absolutely don't want. Yeah. But, I think that in talking to you over these last couple months, I've been exposed to how many different options there are, how many different ways there are to have really whatever you want out of the end of your life and with other people. I mean, we're going to talk about things like having living wakes and things that people have never, I know, your favorite topic, but
I know. You need to be a living wake designer. You'd be so good at it.
Yeah. I'm going to put that on my next to-do list. But, I think that that's part of what these conversations are about too, is just really showing people that we, especially in the United States, have such this like very, very confined, put in a box, tied the bow, put on a shelf understanding of what end of life looks like, what death is. And, I think that there are just, so many different ways to experience that whole process that people aren't even privy to because we don't talk about it.
Right. And, it'll be fun identifying all the threads that we see death in a daily life. I mean, you and I always have such a blast talking about a book we read, or we'll be texting each other, are you watching so-and-so? Oh my God, it all goes back to death, it just all does. And so there'll be lots of funny reminders in your daily life of like, oh yeah, when I die, blah, blah, blah. It can be funny.
Yeah. No, and it is funny. And I think that, we also have, like, you and I are very connected to the energies of people in our lives who have passed.
Oh, yeah.
And so, the way that dreams, the way that people come to us. I mean, sometimes it is funny and just.
Oh, it's hysterical.
Like, yeah. We've had so many good conversations that we're going to bring to the podcast and just share. And hopefully, again, they resonate with people and people feel like, oh, after this podcast episode, I can go have a conversation with my siblings about this, or I can go have a conversation over a glass of wine with my girlfriend. Like, we want this to be about you can be a 35-year-old woman who has nothing to do with grief or death or feeling like the end is imminent and still enjoy listening to what we have to say, not just because we're so funny, but also because, it's informational. And I think that just, again,
it's relatable. I mean, it's the one thing we all have in common. It's the one thing that humanity has in common. And you're not getting out of here without it. It is what it is. They say death and taxes, but there's a lot of people that don't pay their taxes, but everyone dies. So if we all have it in common, there's a lot of material there to share.
Yeah. And it's the great equalizer in a lot of ways. It is probably the one sort of universal truth. I can't think of many things that I think truly across the board, like, hit home for everyone. And the one that comes up most often is we're all going to die.
You die.
It's really true.
Yep.
It's true.
So let's talk about that. Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
All right. Well, I hope that, we've given enough of a background about ourselves and a little intro, and that people are interested and want to join along for the ride and be entertained first and foremost.
Yes.
And learn.
Yeah, we want to have the conversations that are honest and that are happening in real time between us also. We have a lot of conversations behind the scenes where we're talking on the phone or whatever else, and a lot of history. But there are also conversations that we're having for the first time and hearing each other's stories. And we want it to be fun and funny, and also something that is deep enough that people feel like they got something out of it. But I think,
and we have to get over the look I get when I say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do a podcast." Oh, what's it about? What?
By the way, what's really funny is when you say, "Oh, I have to be careful about when I say to people, I'm a death doula." Like,
God, the looks that I get.
I know, but by the way, it's the exact opposite for me. Every single person is like, "Oh my God, I have so much to say," and it's funny because
I get them running away.
I know, we should switch places for a day, just see what. Yeah, but it is interesting. Yeah, there is a major turnoff when it comes to the word death in general, and so we're hoping to destigmatize.
Yes. Can't wait to talk to you next week and see how your week was and pick out the threads of death.
Same. And speaking of threads, if anybody wants to ask us any questions or hear what we're up to or talking about, you can see us on Threads, on Instagram at It All Goes Back to Death, and our website is backtodeath.com, which, by the way, quick funny story to end on. So when I bought the domain name, backtodeath.com, which I was like, I can't even believe that this is available. I then went back on 2 weeks later, and my domain, web platform was giving me a pop-up that was like, okay, backtomurder.com is also available to you. Do you want to buy that domain? And I was like,
thank you.
Well, what does this we're probably on a list somewhere for sure, but death.com it was available and is what we're going by. It's pretty easy.
It's currently still available for anyone that wants to know.
So Back to Murder is. Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. So backtodeath.com and everything is at It All Goes Back to Death if you want to follow us on socials. And we do ask for your questions every week. We do want to do a segment where we're answering people's questions, whether it's about their own fears or, what they are thinking in terms of end of life planning, etc., how to have those hard conversations with your kids. We really talk about everything on there. So, follow us, and you can listen to this podcast, I think, anywhere you get podcasts.
And we'll see you soon.
See you soon.